Welcome back to my personal highlights from the Jewel of Arabia expedition. This is the second of a two-part podcast where I'm looking back on some of the best bits. So if you haven't heard the first part, which goes from Ras Al to Masirah Island, make sure you go back and have a listen. I'm Mark Evans, and when I left you last time, we just visited Masirah Island. Well, a little to the west of Masirah and a little inland on the Omani mainland is the Bar al Hikmann Wetland Reserve, which for a keen birdwatcher like me, well, it's just a magical place. But it's also a treacherous place that British explorer Bertram Thomas skirted around in 1927 to avoid getting his camel stuck in the soft ground. It's a salt marsh wetland home to over 80 species of shorebirds throughout the year. I woke up at our desert camp there to the sound of ospreys, curlews, oyster catchers and flamingos. Aziza Al-Adhoubi is the head of wetland management for the Environment Authority in Oman, and she told me why this is such a significant wetland region.
It is important because, as I've told you, it is a safe place for both the biodiversity and communities like surrounding the place. So because also of the monsoon, the food chain is circulating and regenerating throughout the year. So there is no need for these birds to to leave to other places in frequent times. So we partnered with the Wetlands International, and we did several bird surveys in Bar al Hikmann, focusing into the winter season, and then we did also some surveys in fall and in spring. And we find out that there is not huge difference in between the number of birds residing in the or migrating at the throughout the year at these time intervals. So in winter, it was recorded 500,000 birds, shorebirds, visiting the site, and in fall and spring, it was around between 400,000 to 200,000 birds visiting the site. So the site is important throughout the year. As I've told you, that Bar al Hikmann it's a flat area, but at the edges of the reserve, it is a rock bed area where acacia and prosopis grow, and there are these inland birds are also residing there.
Yeah. Good habitat for them.
Yeah.
And what have you learnt, Aziza? What have you and the other scientists learnt about? Because you mentioned before that you put rings on the legs of these birds.
Yes.
What has that told you? Where do they travel from and travel to? Do we know?
Yes. So we had some records, and they are published in scientific journals, that some birds they don't follow the normal migration route that they suspected that they are following. So in Oman, most of the birds, they come through the West Indian, East African flyway. And some of the birds, they suspect that they came from Scandinavia and Russia. They travel to far East Asia. So these these rings give us an indication that our birds, they also linked with other birds coming through other flyways.
It's obviously a place of international importance, and you're talking about maybe in a couple of months it'll get identified by the Ramsar organisation. What difference will that make? And why is it important to get that recognition? Is Bar al Hikmann under pressure a little bit as the country evolves and more people go there as tourists?
Bar al Hikmann, so far, it is protected by law through the nature reserve recognition. But we wanted also to highlight this recognition nationally and internationally.
My understanding is the best time to look at these birds is high tide, isn't it? Because all the mud is covered and they get squeezed up into a little narrow zone. Is that correct?
So, it is all about the tide. So usually when we do the surveys, we make sure that the highest tide is 2 meter, not below or not above. And I'm not sure if you experience the mudflats of Bar al Hikmann or not yet.
Oh, I have. I've got stuck in my Land Rover there several times.
Okay. So you can still, from the boundary of Bar al Hikmann, from the shoreline, you can walk up to 4 kilometers towards the sea. It is empty, covered with sea grasses and sponges and other crustacea until you get to the deep sea. So that area is where the birds love and they come for resting and feeding. So during the high tide, that area will be covered with the water until it is like the full tide circle or cycle. So we do the watching when the tide is rising. But when the tide is rising, the birds will come closer and closer, so it is much easier to count them.
Yeah.
And then when it is high tide, then the birds will move to the sabha to rest throughout the night.
Okay.
So this is the theory behind it. So we wait until the height is starting, and then when they are closer to the land, it is the optimum time for recording.
I could have stayed at the beautiful Whalehead camp for days, but we just had to keep moving. And it was a man-made wetland that really caught my attention as we travelled further south. Visible from space, the Bar al Hikmann reed beds are the largest man-made reed beds on Earth. Their role is both fascinating and a vital part of the effort to reduce the impact of the hydrocarbon industry in Oman. The plantation is a multi-award-winning flagship project for the biological cleaning of polluted water, which comes from oil production at the Nema oil field in the south of Oman. At peak times, up to 175,000 cubic metres of polluted water runs through the plant each day, and nearly 95% of the crude oil in the water can be removed or recovered by good old Mother Nature without the use of energy or chemicals. And because of its enormous size, the reed bed has other advantages too, as Kudzai Tibugari told me when we dropped in to visit.
So now these plants, they are annual plants, they die, then decompose, giving organic matter now to the bacteria, which is food.
Yeah.
So now the process, we don't have to introduce any chemicals or any fertilizers. It's just there, it can operate naturally. Yeah. It doesn't require any additional chemicals to it, which is good for the environment, which we are an environment company basically. Yes. So we basically looking into solutions which are nature-based, and this is one example of it, which is fantastic.
Yeah, which is why it's been so fascinating. Nature-based solutions have to be the best way to go for a sustainable future. Yes. And I was really impressed because, sadly, I have to confess, we got lost coming here to try and find you. And so we had to resort, when we got a signal, to good old Google Earth. And the green square that you see on Google Earth is incredible. So if you're a migrating bird, like Kudzai said, if you're migrating from Africa to Asia, across Arabia, it must look like a McDonald's down below, and so tempting to drop in, which is clearly what happens. But you also mentioned fish before, which I think was the tilapia fish.
Yes.
Why did you introduce them? Was that a source of potential food for people or for wildlife, or what role do they play?
Okay, yes. So now the Nile tilapia, to begin with, the type of fish which we chose, it can live in brackish water, in dirty water. It can thrive well. It's not sensitive. So why we introduced it, it was basically to kill the life cycle of the mosquito. That was the main reason, because we don't want to be breeding mosquitoes here. So we brought in the fish so that it can kill the life cycle of the mosquito. And as the numbers started to increase, we realized birds were also getting interested.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, now it's a win-win even for the birds. They're coming now to enjoy the fish. Yeah. And also we are getting the control of mosquitoes naturally.
Yeah, brilliant.
Not spraying anything.
And we saw that beautifully, didn't we, about 20 minutes ago when we came around the corner. So we've been driving. So the whole plant is divided into a grid system of roads between the reed beds. And when we came around a corner with Kudzai earlier, lots of herons flew up and cormorants because they've been gorging themselves on these tilapia fish. Yes. So everybody's happy, really. And what really impressed me, because I could see noticeably, so the whole thing is gravity fed. Yes. So from the start to the end, water flows naturally. But the water at the end was so clean. There are plans now to use that for potentially other things, for agricultural output or trees. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So now when the water is treated, it is now available for any agricultural use. And we have already done some trials, which is kind of a proof of concept that the water we are producing is good for agriculture. We have done a trial around 2019, 2020 there, where we planted different species and we're watering them with this water, and some of them thrived, some of them died, which is common in a trial. So now we have got the results. We have got the names of the trees or the plant species which can survive in this water, which now there is an ongoing discussion to find any kind of development to be made from these results which we got. Mm-hmm. That's one beauty. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And there was something else you mentioned that I think our listeners might be interested to hear. When you were giving us a presentation at the start, you mentioned the reduction, so the change from a traditional method of trying to separate the water and the oil, which used pumps and was quite cost expensive. But also you mentioned the difference in the carbon footprint of the biological process, the sort of CO2 output compared to the traditional process. Could you talk a little bit about that?
True, because if you look at the past method, and some oil and gas companies, they're still using that old method where they inject into the earth's surface. They call them the deep well disposals. But now with this wetlands technology now, because of the green plants which are growing, and we also use gravity, we are not pumping this water. There's a height elevation from each stage of treatment. And as I mentioned, over 490 hectares of green, there's carbon sequestration now. Mm-hmm. We are removing a substantial amount of carbon from the air, just from this project. So you can appreciate that the main goal was only to replace this expensive and not environmentally friendly method of disposing the water which is coming from oil and gas with a wetlands, but now the wetlands has come in with biodiversity, animals are growing in the wetlands. There's a lot of benefits.
What's really lovely to see and experience in Oman is this transition from an economy based on carbon to an ambition to become a green energy hub, a global green energy hub. And whenever I speak to people about, well, where can I find out about this transition, everyone points me to one extraordinary man called Dr. Faras al-Abdouani. And my conversation with Dr. Faras is absolutely fascinating. He's a real pioneer and a visionary who's had an extraordinary career path, and now works as Director General of Renewable Energy, including green hydrogen, at the Ministry of Energy and Minerals in Oman. Dr. Faras, where are we in regards to this journey from a carbon-based economy to Oman becoming a green energy hub?
So today, Oman remains a predominantly oil and gas-based economy. We also believe that we will continue to rely on oil and gas in a more sustainable and a more carbon-conscious manner. But we also have the opportunity to pivot towards renewable energy and integrating that quite strongly into our energy mix. And you mentioned the shift from Ministry of Oil and Gas to Ministry of Energy. And this is something that is universal, to be honest, because electricity at one point was seen as a utility and a predominant, depending on where you are, but it was at least the majority of the world is predominantly hydrocarbon driven. As electrification became more prominent, as renewable energies dropped in cost and they became more mature, it made sense to blend these together into one entity, and that's why many ministries transformed from Ministry of Oil and Gas to Ministry of Energy. And if we take it a step forward, you'll see that many ministries today are actually ministries of energy and climate affairs, or ministries of, if you take the UK, for example, it's called the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. So, and you need to blend the two together, the decarbonization with energy, or the economy with decarbonization, depending on what is the main driver of your economy. In Oman, we're energy driven, so energy and climate affairs, and many other countries have that. It makes sense because they do not necessarily run in tandem. And you need to have one policymaker to be able to orchestrate the transition in an orderly manner. And this is something that Oman is really focused on. So we have it at the ministerial committee level, where the coordination is happening to ensure that we transition from a predominantly oil and gas economy to a sustainable, friendly, and clean energy-driven economy in a very planned manner.
People outside of Oman would associate sunshine with Oman, but the wind, a lot of people listening to this outside of Oman might not know that in the summer we have several months of monsoon wind, the Kharif, that blows, that provides another renewable resource that's accessible to Oman. And so where is Oman in the onshore and offshore wind economy?
Sure. So Oman is definitely blessed. I mean, Kharif is a beautiful season for a seasoned adventurer as you are. You've seen what the areas next to Bar al Hikmann, and also in the south and west of Oman, the middle section of Oman, how they transform in the different seasons. And blessedly, the wind, although it intensifies in certain areas during Kharif, in fact, one of the reasons why Oman is considered blessed is that there are some spots in Oman where the wind is throughout the whole year. And if we look at the solar intensity or radiance, Oman is in the top 13 nations. If we look at these spots in Oman, some of them bring Oman into the top 20 areas in the nations when it comes to wind alone. The beautiful thing is that when you combine the two profiles, so if you go to these spots which are rich in wind, they also happen to be rich in solar, and if you look at the two profiles together and aggregate them, then Oman becomes one of the top 5 nations in the world of the aggregate profile. The wind, or in these spots, the wind happens to pick up at night slightly more than it is at the evening. So they sort of average out. Does not become a perfect flat line, as would be the ideal scenario, the combination of the two, but it's not far off. So we have an aggregate of wind and solar that together puts Oman as one of the 5 top spots where if you generate these efficiently and cost effectively, then the levelized cost of electricity is one of the cheapest in the world. So harnessing this energy and utilizing it, and of course doing it environmentally friendly manner, and thinking of the environment and the society, these are all things that we are working on. It will help Oman transition towards a greener economy.
Ironically, the day after I've been speaking with Dr. Faras about wind energy, I remember waking up, watching the sunrise, and without a single breath of wind. Just still, crisp desert air. It's so beautiful, but that wind does come almost every day as the sun heats up the ground. When I first came to Oman in the 1990s, the best place to see birds of prey was at the landfill site just outside of Muscat. Not the most pleasant place for the birds or us humans, but things have changed, and once again Oman is doing something rather special. Using a model that's already working well in India, the first Omani raptor restaurant is just about to open its doors. By separating out the food and offal waste from the general landfill, there are many benefits all round. I'll let Ahmed Al-Zubair, Senior Sustainability Strategist from BIA, explain how it all works.
So the name is funny, and I remember when we pitched it the first time, even to our management, they were like, dumbfounded. They just stared at us like, you're opening a restaurant, and we were like, no. So it's a very simple idea. At the end of the day, it's a site that you set aside certain food, or in essence, it is waste at the end of the day. But to these birds, it is food, and you set it aside, and mainly it's carry-ons, dead animals, from slaughterhouse waste. It's parts of animal bodies that we humans don't like to eat or can't even.
Yeah.
And these raptors have an ability to consume foods and parts of animals that we can't even digest. Our digestive system would refuse and wouldn't input, let's say. So this type of waste is there anyway. It will always be there, and we can't make use of it. And instead of having it just rot away, it's an opportunity, and that's how we see this project as well. We no longer see it as, a negative impact and a challenge, but this is an opportunity for us to give back to these birds, which used to do us a favor, in the past.
Yes.
They would clean up after us.
Yeah.
So we're giving back to them. They're happy, hopefully. And then for us, it's, it's, even if it's a small percentage, but it's moving towards our diversion targets as well. We want to move away from our landfills one day. We have a 80% diversion target by 2030, I believe. And even if that's a small step, but it is a small step in the right direction. Now, there was challenges, of course, when we started. These species of birds, specifically Egyptian vulture steppe eagles, are globally endangered, and they've been recognized and identified in the IUCN Red List. So they did a study in Oman to see what are the populations locally, and are they endangered here or not. And they saw that there is a healthy number of these birds today, but it is declining. And there are different reasons. One was that in such slaughterhouses, or even before, when it's cattle and it's in farms, they would give them a certain diclofenac, I think they call it, which is basically kind of it's something given to these cattle to make sure that they don't get sick long term and stay healthy. But what would happen is it would become poison later on when they're dead animals, and these birds would feed on them. So that was one of the first challenges. And I'm happy to say that through the efforts of ESO and EA, they have banned the use of this chemical in Oman for this purpose. So that was one of the biggest hurdles or challenges, and it's been, let's say, passed. Another was electrocution. So these birds, they like to perch, and they like, and as I said, they're shy birds, so they don't like to be in the city with humans. So they tend to be in remote areas, and these remote areas have these long, long range electric wires, high voltage, and they like to perch on them, and unfortunately, some were being electrocuted. Another challenge, and of course I'm talking nationally here, another national challenge with these birds was illegal hunting. People would just catch them, hobbyists maybe, where they're not sure, they're not very fully aware of what these birds are and their status globally and all of that. So there was a bit of that as well. And then finally, which is the final challenge, which is related to us, was access to food. Yeah, and like I described, as BA moved to more sanitary landfills, it became a challenge for them. So we're trying to target that fourth challenge and give them access to food. And like I said, they are shy, so it's not just a matter of just throwing food on the side. You kind of do a bit have to create a site where it's a bit safe from other predators or other species, because like I said, they are shy birds, and if they see someone else, you know, in amongst the food, they'll be like, oh, not my turn yet. So you kind of have to do a bit of let's say setting up the site, but at the end of the day, it is simply just a site, fence site, where they can also clearly, if you remember, one of my first points was they rely on their eyesight.
Yes.
So you need to make sure they can also see it from high above.
You can listen to my full conversations with Dr. Faraz and Ahmed Al-Zubair on the Jewel of Arabia website, both of them doing fascinating work. Every night as we set up camp on the expedition, one of the last tasks was to set up the camera trap. We wanted to see what wildlife was around us after the sun went down, and as we reached further south into the Dhofar region of southern Oman, we entered into a land of the Arabian leopard, striped hyenas, Arabian cobra and porcupine. So each morning it was always really exciting to see what had been passing by our sleeping bags the night before. There's a real art to putting out camera traps. I'm not particularly good at it, but I just try and put myself into the mind of the animal, and where would I walk if I were that particular animal in this particular landscape. And I spotted up the hill a nice sort of low vertical wall of rock, which ran horizontal. It was vertical for about 3 meters, but then ran horizontally across the hillside. And I just figured that any animal walking on that hillside would probably follow the base of that rock face. And so that's where I put. Someone donated us a load of cooked lamb yesterday, including the skull and various ribs. So that we didn't eat was deposited in front of the camera trap. I taped the camera trap to a tree trunk, and then went up this morning first thing to retrieve that. And it was really, really exciting, because as you will have seen if you've been following our social media, we've been feeding foxes in Oman since day one, really. There seem to be foxes everywhere. In the desert, lots of gerbils and gerds. We've had a bat or two, we've had cats, but last night we caught on camera a beautiful Arabian wolf, which is something I've wanted to see for years. Of course, I've seen them on TV, but I wanted to see one fairly close too. So it was really interesting that we were sleeping out on our mattresses under the stars on the ground last night, and there was a lovely Arabian wolf walking no more than 100 meters away, chomping on a sheep's skull that we'd left out for him. So a beautiful animal. I was pretty sure it was a wolf. I sent it out to some good friends, Hardy Hikmani and Andrew Spalton and Khalid Hikmani, Hardy's brother, and they all came back and confirmed, absolutely, yep, Arabian wolf. So if you want to see a picture of an Arabian wolf, go on to our Instagram page, Jewel of Arabia Expedition, and you'll be able to see the images we captured last night on the camera trap. As well as all of the foxes, the rodents, the occasional camel's legs and these wonderful wolves, we also had filmed honey badgers, striped hyenas and genet cats by the end of the expedition. That audio diary update was from near the end of the expedition itself, and our minds were already turning towards arrival in Salalah, meeting local dignitaries and attending a series of welcome receptions. But one of the biggest welcomes we got was when we visited the Knowledge Gate International School in Muscat. It was a day the team and I will never forget, and I just want to share that moment with you. Today, I have to admit, I was moved to tears. I was really having to choke back the tears when the two vehicles slowly drove into a school with 600 wildly enthusiastic young people cheering us in, because something pretty special has been happening at a school called Knowledge Gate International School, Muscat. And today's podcast is really just to share with you some of the inspirational work that the teachers and the young people have been doing at that school, which I know has been, replicated in other schools around the region, but this one did something really, really special, and we were really touched with the welcome and the reception and that we had today. And I have to say, when we saw on the journey social media posts coming out from all these schools, British School Muscat, British School Salalah, Knowledge Gate, Ahmed bin Majid School. It really was an inspiration for us to keep going and doing what we were doing to inspire the next generation of young people.
And what a fantastic KGIS welcome. Thank you. And
I'm with Zoe Woolley, the Executive Principal of Knowledge Gate International School, who've given us the most extraordinary welcome this morning as we walked in. You will have heard the pipe band, you will have heard 500 very excited young people cheering us into the car park with our nice Land Rovers. So I'm here, I've just stood aside now with Zoe, who is the Executive Principal. Zoe, can you try and summarise in a couple of minutes? We've been walking and riding camels and driving cars for the last 30 days, trying to share that with as many people as we can through social media, but then it really boils down to teachers hopefully trying to make use of that in a creative way to inspire the next generation of young planetary caretakers. So can you tell us what have you been doing here in Knowledge Gate for the last 30 days whilst we've been riding on the back of camels and walking through the deserts of Oman?
Well, we've been very jealous that you have been walking through the beautiful landscape of Oman. But for us as teachers, making connections to real life teaching and learning is so important. So we have been using your journey to highlight the beautiful country we've been in, and then looking beyond that, looking at the wildlife, and then what can we actually do to preserve this wildlife, looking at your route planning, what's the maths behind the route planning, and what does it take to actually plan a journey for 30 days. We've been looking at the way in which explorers over time have changed their methodology, have changed the way they've done things in order that they can get their message and their word further afield. So what we've done is we've infused our curriculum with the Jewel of Arabia. All of our departments have got on board, which has been fantastic. The children have been buzzing every morning because they want to know what you saw on your camera trap last night. They are always very intrigued about camels. But then also the message very much for us is that our children can make a change for the future. So they've seen what you have experienced. We've managed to make that come alive in our classroom. And then the part at the end, which is so important, how do we preserve this? What's the legacy that the school's going to have? And how do these children that cheered you in this morning, how has your journey changed the way they think?
That event for me encapsulated one of the key aims of the Jewel of Arabia expedition, which is to inspire the current and the next generation to understand the importance of sustainability and biodiversity and making a change for the future. As ecologist Jane Goodall said, the world is changed by action and example, not by wishful thinking and opinion. I hope you've enjoyed revisiting just some of the personal highlights of the expedition with me. Join me again very soon, because in the next podcast, we're going to explore more about how that legacy is starting to take root, both in Oman and around the world. But for now, go and visit the Jewel of Arabia website to find out more about many of the ways in which Oman is protecting its biodiversity and pushing towards a more sustainable future. I'm Mark Evans. Bye for now.